Welcome to The Compass, a show where we discuss today's world from a Christian perspective. I'm Nevin Belcher.
And I'm Hanzel. Today's show is about freedom of speech. Let's dive in. In recent years, defending Christianity has become an increasingly challenging endeavor. Christians have encountered a growing number of challenges to the freedom of speech. Concerns have emerged regarding matters such as the presence of religious symbols in public spaces, the capacity to conscientiously object to specific practices, and the role of religion in education. Some have experienced pushback concerning their right to prayer in school and their ability to share the gospel. Additionally, expressing conservative viewpoints on social issues has been met with controversy, leading to concerns that their religious freedom is being compromised.
The teaching of its evolution is the relationship with the Christianity in schools has been a major discussion among parents, teachers, and churches. Many Christians struggle with the concept of the evolution because they feel accepting it would mean abandoning their faith. However, many Christians are starting to accept evolutionary theory to better understand the world and God's role in creating it.
Students' lives and beliefs are usually shaped in school by what they are taught, and evolution is no different. Many students who are taught evolution in school tend to believe in this going forward in their lives. There is a growing concern about how much control the school system has over shaping young minds in ways that are controversial, such as the teaching of evolution.
For more on this topic, we have Ethan Holland talking about the history of Christianity and secularism in the modern world.
Freedom of speech is inextricably tied up with freedom of religion, and nothing shows that better than the constant debate between Christianity and secular culture. Christians have traced these conflicts back to both political and philosophical origins.
We could really focus in on the latter part of the 19th century, early 20th century, with the progressive movement, which incorporated a number of elements that were secular in nature.
Existentialism says we create our own meaning. Our existence is meaningful. So if everybody is creating their own meaning, if I come along and say what you're doing is wrong and what you believe is wrong, I'm essentially saying your life has no meaning.
Despite some of these blows to Christianity, Charles Russo of the Catholic World Report shows that the court has improved in protecting Christians' free speech. This freedom was improved by Winmar v. Vincent, which set a precedent of giving freedom of religion wider freedom of speech privileges. On the flip side, Christians can also take the lead in promoting healthy discussion within their own personal lives.
When people have a heart of love and goodness, for the most part, that eliminates a lot of the conflict. And sometimes, even if somebody disagrees, I can try to understand that person better.
This has been Ethan Holland reporting for MCSWU.
Thank you, Ethan. After the break, we have Mike Shannon on Christians' freedom of speech.
I'm sorry, you're taking...
No, up here. You had it.
Well, thank you.
You got to sit with me today at freshman orientation.
Okay, what's your name?
Caleb.
I'm Abigail. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Give me my shirt. Let's go. Where are we going?
All right.
Yeah, where are we going?
And now you may open.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Will you marry me?
Yes! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Caleb is very optimistic about their future together, but their future may not be quite so bright. Remember, ring by spring is not the goal. Stay safe and stay single out there during freshman mating season.
The Media Communications program at Southern Wesleyan University originally started with only 8 students, but now has risen up to 45 majors, and it was ranked number 6 in the state as of 2020.
Here at SWU, I feel like I've been able to build a portfolio. Like, we're actually doing hands-on work, and that's what I appreciate the most.
I see a lot of potential in this program. It's been good to teach what I've been taught. I think that we just need to keep buying into each other.
Welcome back from the break. I am here with Reverend Mike Shannon, the Assistant University Chaplain for Southern Wesleyan. We're here to ask him some questions about our freedom of speech as Christians. How are you today, Reverend Shannon?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Nevin.
What does freedom of speech mean to us as Christians, and why is it important?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, first of all, it's a recognized right, not just by Americans, but internationally as well. You know that it's a basic human right, freedom of speech, and the reason why I think it ought to be a concern for those of us who are Christian has to do with freedom in general. For Christ has set us free. That we are free indeed. And so freedom is a very big part of our Christian theology, and that includes freedom of speech. We want our ministers to be able to pray as they ought to pray. Clergy, I would say, to pray as their religious customs allow them to pray. So I'm including Judaism, Islam, and Christianity in that as well. So we want them to be able to pray, and pray without any kind of hindrance, without any kind of government hindrance. And certainly, I think those of us of the Christian faith, we want that as well.
Okay. As a chaplain, what are some of your challenges you have seen or faced personally as a Christian when trying to express freedom of speech?
Yeah, I think now before becoming a chaplain here at SWU, I was a military chaplain, and I think that's a different venue where I think where you can have the kind of this internal pressure. There's no documents or instructions, anything like that prohibit the free exercise of religion. In fact, the very thing that we try to establish as chaplains in the military, for example, or Department of Defense, would be that we were there to protect the First Amendment rights of all warriors, whoever comes into the military, whoever's wearing the uniform. So they don't lose their freedom of speech, but there's this kind of internal, where you have to watch what you say when you're in uniform. We don't talk about political personalities or things like that, either approvingly of them or disapprovingly of them. So we have to really watch that. But also, even though there's no instruction or especially in the religious world, I think there is this kind of pressure culturally to minimize, especially for those of us who are of the Christian faith, to minimize our talk and speech of Jesus Christ. It's like you can talk about just about anything else, but when you allow Jesus into the picture, then there's a pressure internally. And I think there's also in our culture today, just in general, there's this ongoing pressure to minimize our speech when it comes to Jesus. And I can give you an example. I remember one time a commander came, actually he had his exec call me, and I was going to do a change of command for them. And now I'm a major. I've been in the military for a while by this time, and so this wasn't anything new to me. But to have the exec called over and say, hey, we want a copy of your prayer before you pray. And so I pushed back a bit and said, hey, you're not infringing on my First Amendment right to free speech, are you? And of course, as soon as you do that, they kind of back off a little bit because they don't want any kind of, congressional investigation of our, that's going against our First Amendments or anything like that. So they backed off on that. But I do know of others who have been pressured either to hand their sermons over to a supervisor or something like that because they wanted to see what their sermon was going to say about not only about Jesus, but maybe about a certain hot topic that is popular right now. And to me, that's what we're there. We're there to defend and protect those rights, and then to have someone who, even though there's no instruction or anything like that, in other words, we're not freely giving up our rights at that point, but they're trying to pressure us to give up that right. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Especially in the last 5 years, how has Christian freedom of speech have been challenged?
Well, I think that's one way, but I think in the Boy, especially since the pandemic, I would say there was a great deal of pressure for Christians to not speak their mind, and I would have to say there have been administrations who have really kind of pressured Christianity to leave their faith within the confines of the church, within the building, in other words. Not, when we think of church, we think of people, wherever we gather. So, but for them, they really think of a building, so you should keep your speech and your opinions there, and it shouldn't be brought in the public opinion or in the public arena. And I would challenge that. I think we have just as much right as anyone to bring our speech into the public arena. But I would also add to that, I believe that we as Christians, we have a higher authority that we are governed by, a higher ethic, I would even say, and that's to Jesus Christ. Our loyalty and allegiance ultimately is pledged to Him and to Him alone. And so with that, I would say there's certain speech that we should be mindful of as Christians. In other words, we don't engage one another in lewd, degrading speech, even though I might have the right. And there's even a public opinion now that just be who you are. Well, sometimes you got to back off on that, and that's what Christ calls us to. Not be who you are, but be more like me, in other words, And so, or be more like Christ is what I intend by that.
Be more like Christ, and also, most importantly, be yourself at the end of the day. That's all that matters.
Well, to be, as long as you're going in that direction, I'm okay with that thought. But yeah, I think we do have to watch how we talk. If our language is degrading, dehumanizing, and things like that, I think that's contrary to the kingdom of God, and again, that higher ethic I think He calls us to. So we do have to guard our speech that way. But like I said, going back to your original question, I do think there has been a great deal of pressure placed on Christians to try to keep their speech more in the sanctuary or in the building and not so much in the public arena. But again, I would say, look, the Bible is very clear. There are times when prophets and priests, but especially prophets, had to go to people in government and say, "Thus saith the Lord," And sometimes we need the freedom to be able to say, "Hey, this is probably not right," or "This is really maybe going in the wrong direction for us as a people." And again, I think free speech is is good for our human flourishing. So if it's good for our human flourishing and for us to be able to dialogue and talk without yelling and screaming over one another, calling each other names and things like that, even though that would be considered free speech, it doesn't allow for human flourishing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I guess that's how I would answer it.
Are there some settings that have been challenged for Christians to practice their right freedom of speech for their religion? For example, in places of education.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of examples, and you could probably Google a lot of those. I do think I think institutions of higher learning have made a tremendous impact on our culture, and not always for the positive. And I would say that's one of them. I think it's another arena where they are very greatly offended by the name of Jesus and anyone attached to that name, especially for those of us who call on His name and identify as Christians. So yes, I think in that arena it's a very difficult place to be. But for those who find themselves in Christian groups where they can encourage one another to stand strong, stand firm in their faith without compromise. I'm glad to see those organizations exist within the universities, and that we have good, godly young men and women who are standing strong in the faith and in those arenas and not ashamed. So yeah, I do think that is one arena that where Christians are being challenged greatly.
How can Christians continue to protect their freedom of speech?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is we need to be aware of the people that we vote for and where they stand on this issue, because there is a lot of talk right now about freedom of speech and what is considered disinformation, what is considered to be hate speech and those kinds of things, and so with that, there's a desire to kind of pull back on our freedoms and on our ability to speak freely and things like that. So I do think we need to be aware of those that we're voting for and where they stand on this topic. But I also think within the church context, I think this is a great topic to be able to talk amongst ourselves. What do we mean by free speech? How do we handle it? And how do we handle it on Facebook, and how do we handle it? I mean, there's some stuff, brother, let me tell you. I've seen some things on Facebook from fellow Christians. I'm like, ooh, man, you probably should have talked to your pastor before you wrote that, So it might be a good topic even in the church to be able to talk about ourselves, and what's proper, what's improper, and how should we go about, this topic.
Thank you so much, Reverend Shannon. After the break, Ryan McCacker goes to the street to ask people about Christianity and freedom of speech in religion. Then, media professor Dr. Lewis Knight will talk about journalism and freedom of speech. Stay tuned.
This is what winners are made of. This is what leaders are made of. This is what scholars are made of. This is what believers are made of. This is what warriors are made of.
Yeah, that looks pretty good. Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course, man. Don't even swear.
Really? Chatty, you are the best.
No, I got you.
These things all seem plagiarized to me. I think I'm gonna have to fail you.
Why fail me? You only got one friend's help on these, Chad.
ChatGPT? No AI in our school.
ChatGPT and other AI sites are not a moral way to do your work. Have integrity and don't use ChatGPT for your assignments.
Wait. Did you see the red light?
What red light?
Get up the road!
We are back with more from the campus. With all this talk about freedom of speech, it has me wondering, Bella, what are your thoughts about the Christianity and the secularism?
Well, personally, I believe in the Constitution and that the First Amendment gives me the right to have freedom of speech and be able to say whatever I want. Obviously, as a Christian, I don't believe in blasphemy or being rude with my words to anyone, but I believe we do have the right in America to express whatever we want to say. How about yourself?
Honestly, I kind of feel the same way because as a young adult male, you basically want to have the courage to to speak whatever you want without being negative, but just kind of spread the positive information to encourage others to not do say for example that if your neighbor was out doing something that had no business or so, you actually want to confront him, have a one-on-one conversation of exactly what made you decide to do this or so. So basically you kind of encourage him to not make that type of mistakes again, because otherwise it will always come back and get you in the long run.
While still having respect in that conversation. You believe that you should still be able to have that conversation, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. I agree. Now we go to Ryan on the street as he asks students about their views on Christianity in today's society.
Welcome to this week's episodes of Students Say. On this week's episode, we're going to be exploring the topics of gender and sexuality. Let's go.
Yeah, I have. I felt hesitant in middle school because I didn't want to get bullied. And so I guess I really didn't talk about it in middle school much. People knew I was a Christian, but I didn't really share my faith because I was afraid of getting picked on or bullied. I'm more open about it now. I mean, obviously, I go to Christian university, but now it is that topic of conversation of, this is what I believe in. And all my friends know how I believe. A lot of strangers know what I believe in and how I react to those kinds of situations. But I think now more I'm stronger in my faith than I was in middle school. Yeah, middle school was really strong in my faith. But yeah, so I think it's just having that deep-rooted understanding of what you're saying. Yeah.
I have felt a lot of hesitance in my life. To be honest, it can be difficult to share the gospel, but God Jesus gives us the authority to do these things through the Spirit. And so, as long as we do our part in the commission, God will give us the strength to persevere.
I would say at times I do feel hesitant to share Jesus when it seems like that person might not want to hear it, and so I don't even bother to share it, which is very selfish of me because I should. Yeah, and then times I do share Jesus, I just I guess I just feel a little bit Jesus, so I'm like, okay, this person should hear it, and then when the person hears it, then there's something else.
So I actually grew up in an area where there were a lot of lost people, and so I did grow up in an area where I was scared a lot of the time to share Jesus with people around me, because when I did, it wasn't accepted or it wasn't taken properly or the way I would have expected it to be taken. And I learned that the best way for me to share Jesus with those people was through my actions, through my attitude, through the way that I was as a person, because it wasn't my job to change their hearts or make them believe what I believe, but it was more of they could see through my good works and through my personality, through the things that I did, through how I acted, how I reacted to trials, stuff like that. That's how they would give glory to God. So oh, this girl's different. And so that's how I went about that. But I feel like now I've become more confident in still sharing Jesus with them and just letting them know I'm praying for them, sometimes praying for them right then and there, and just my will.
Yeah.
I have before, because some people just don't take his name very well, and so I think you have to be careful sometimes with how you start that conversation, because it's very simple to hear it, and if you're trying to build a relationship with a person, you just jump in and start talking about someone they don't know. I think it's a relationship that you build, and then it's brought up, and invite them to come with you to play youth group events.
I have felt hesitant sharing Jesus with people, but when I do, I usually go about it by saying I'm usually okay, this is how I've experienced God and why I believe in the Lord and how He has worked in my life and how He's doing favor and how He's been faithful to me. I kind of share a bit of my testimony to get more so hey, this is my experience with the Lord. This is how you could maybe experience it.
I think that everybody has right to life, whether they're born or not, and I definitely do not agree with abortion. I think that it's wrong because the Bible talks about Jesus knew us in our mother's womb, He put us together, He had plans for us, and so I just feel it's definitely murder. If you murder a pregnant woman, it's double homicide. So I think everybody has that right to life, and what they do with it is their choice. But we all have that right. Yeah.
My thoughts on abortion was, my whole life I've been told that it is wrong, and personally I've been looking into it, and I came to the conclusion that it is not okay to do that. I believe that life is precious, and that everybody Well, I believe that like ending a life before it hasn't even started, per se, is wrong because I believe that people have different paths and different destinies in life, and so cutting that short is, I think, it's an abomination. But I'm still trying to look into it to see if my specific opinion on it, but I do believe that it is not okay.
I feel like everyone should be able to live out their lives, and so like cutting a life off even that early. I feel like God has made each and every one of us with a special plan, and even when it's like formed in a mother's womb, He had an aim for us, and so if we're not able to live that out, it's kind of sad to me because they had a plan, they were a calling, but they weren't able to live it out.
So I am pro-life. I do believe that we should not take the lives of babies in any aspect. I just feel like everyone deserves the right to life, and they are made in the image of God, and so we don't have the right to take that away from them.
I believe life is unconditional.
So, the way I've been for a while is that I usually tend to be like, I don't know. It's like, okay, you have your side that's like, okay, abortion is murder, and then people who also think like it should be a basic human right. And I've usually steered away from it because, one, I'm not a woman, so like I feel like it's none of my business, but at the same time, I'm a Christian, and I feel like I should, be on the side that's like, we should not like support abortion. So it's kind of still like a middle. No, definitely.
I think that there are two genders, male and female. Talks about in the Bible how God created the male and female, and He created male to be with female. So that's my stance on it. I'm not one to change my stance on that because it's kind of set in stone. And the Bible talks about sexual immorality and like the different problems that we see with that, and I feel like in today's culture it's so pushed as normal that a lot of just like normal people, but also like Christians as well, see it as okay, and I feel like we need to kind of go back to what God taught us and what He tells us, and they say reclaim the rainbow, and that's kind of true because it's a promise that God wouldn't flood the earth, not the symbol of gay pride. And so, like I said, I feel like there's two genders, and I do not agree with homosexuality because God did create male and female to be male with female.
So I think that in general, humans, our humanity, we tend to complicate things, and we have a history of doing that. Personally, I believe that Scripture tells us, and there are many examples, that it is incorrect, referring to like same-sex marriage or homosexuality or whatever. On the side of like gender, I believe that there are two, and I believe that in the world full of lies, the truth can seem insane, and that's why I'm clinging onto the Word and understanding the roots of Scripture. Kind of gives us a foundation of how to live our lives, and when it comes to like homosexuality or identity or anything, it can be a little complicated, yeah. But that's why Jesus tells us to love on other people, and love through like by caring for them, and through correction. Not bashing on the other person's belief, but loving on them and helping them understand that even if they believe a certain way for a certain thing, we will always be. We will not view them as lesser than us.
I feel like, I don't know, it's like back in the Bible how God created man and woman, and I feel like that should stand. I mean, like, He created us to be that particular person, and we should be able to live out and not change our identity. Because I found out like identity is found in Christ, and so we should live our life that's going to glorify and honor God through our identity. So changing that is just not following along with God's guidelines for us.
So I think that since we live in a world that was destined to like sin and have be broken, I believe that those things are they're just like any other like thing we have in the world. But it's just our job as Christians to lead by example and be set apart so that we can lead those people to Christ.
There's only two genders, but you can be attracted sexually to different things and have different interests, but there's only two actual genders.
So my thoughts about gender and sexuality is I can't really put myself in the shoes of the people, or I try to put myself in the shoes of the people who have like gender identity confusion, and thinking about that and how they're not understanding themselves or they're trying to figure themselves out, and so I'm like, who am I guess to judge or like to sort of deny them, like calling them what they want to be called. I feel like it's the least that I can do to make that person feel seen and heard, just simply as a person. And sexual identity in general, I feel like whether people identify as gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual, whatever, I feel like it's more sexualized. I feel like as Christians we tend to see like, oh, they only are wanting sex with the same gender, rather than, oh, these people also want to be seen and loved and have a marriage and have a family as well. I feel like it's tend to be more sexualized rather than seeing these people as people who just want relationships in the future and a family. So, yeah, that's really perfect.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Students Say. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Ryan. We would love to hear about your thoughts about Christianity and the secular world on our Instagram and Facebook accounts. When we return from the break, we will hear from Dr. Lewis Knight about journalism and First Amendment rights. And stay tuned because later we will be going to get a deeper perspective on unreliable media.
Wake up and focus. Because this is not a drill. This is not about cliches, shallow taglines, or some inspirational quote for you to tweet, snap, pin, or post. No, this is where snooze buttons are frozen, alarm clocks are broken, where feet hit the floor because dreams are now woken. This is it. Awaken your dreams. Awaken your soul. Awaken your purpose. This is Southern Wesleyan University.
How am I supposed to move on? He was my fiance. I lost him all in one night because of a stupid choice. I could have done something. What do you mean I could have done something? What was I supposed to do? I don't want to hear it anymore. Bye.
Welcome back to The Compass. I am here with Dr. Lewis Knight, Professor of Media Communications. We're here to ask him some questions about journalism and the First Amendment rights. How are you today, Lewis?
I'm good, thanks. How are you today?
Not too bad. How have people's overall First Amendment rights been challenged in the last 5 years?
Well, I think that there, from what I understand, what I've been following in the news, is that the government, particularly the administration, has been getting with big tech and actually paying them to the tune of like $3 million to have access to their content and sway over what content gets allowed and what gets discarded.
In the terms of current topics such as gender, sexuality, or abortion, how has their involvement challenged the freedom of speech, do you think?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with what's going on in many of the universities. Not at this university. I'm grateful to be with you guys. But in many of the universities, students are taught to be activists rather than journalists. And with that activism, bias is easily introduced into a culture that would otherwise be taught the facts. And so instead of teaching facts or offering facts in the news, what these activist journalists, I hate to call them journalists, are giving us are opinions that are based on virtue signaling. Victims have sway over the oppressors, and if you're LGBTQ, part of your virtue is that you are a minority, which kind of makes you, in intersectionality, a hero of sorts.
In regards to journalism, what ethical concerns involve freedom of speech?
Well, the ethical concerns are, when I was going to journalism school as a young man versus many years later when I was getting my PhD, what I was taught is that as a reporter, as a journalist, I dig for the facts. And there are more than two sides to a story. We're always told there's two sides to a story. I say there are more than two sides. So I have to really investigate. And my job is to get to all the facts, present them to the audience, now my users, the people that would use my information online, so that they can make good decisions and they can then interpret the news that suits their belief system.
What are the ethical considerations for journalists when reporting on a sensitive topic?
Again, I would return to the fact that I have to find the facts, present the facts, and in my career in broadcasting and journalism, people wouldn't know that I'm conservative by nature. My friends all know, and my colleagues all knew that I was conservative by nature, but in my reporting or in my commentary, whatever was my professional take on a topic, no one would know that I'm a conservative. They would just say Lewis is neutral.
How does the concept of fake news affect the credibility of journalism, and what can be done about it?
Well, there's an interesting thing that just came out. Gallup poll just came up with their latest statistics say that 32% of our population have faith in the news, believe the news. Now, I've seen earlier Pew polling that said we only have 18% of the population trust news media. Whichever it is, that's somewhere in between maybe. We don't trust our news media anymore. I remember as a young man, we had people like Walter Cronkite that was very left-leaning, liberal, progressive. I call him regressive. However, but he was considered a great arbiter, a great anchor person, and we could turn him on at night on CBS News, and he held the chair. He was the anchor, and we trusted what he was telling us, even though we knew he had a left-leaning bias. He didn't present it in the newscast. Yeah. Nowadays, people that call themselves anchors, aren't anchoring. They're opinion editors, and they're giving us their opinion.
Thank you, Lewis, for talking with us.
Thank you for having me today.
Of course. After the break, we will get a more in-depth perspective about curriculum in schools and dishonesty in journalism.
What if there's a place for you where your dreams and future collide with God's vision and direction, where thinking and doing go hand in hand with innovation, where servant leaders of the next generation are grown, and where your story can be written and change the course of history, where generosity is contagious, and if you catch it, you just might change the world. This is it. Step into community, step into faith, step into life, step into Southern Wesleyan University.
Welcome back from the break. In recent years, there has been a growing push for LGBTQIA+ curriculum inclusion in schools. As far back as 2011 with California's Fair Education Act, which required the inclusion of LGBTQ+ history in K-12 education, have countries and regions have introduced guidelines and mandates to ensure that LGBTQIA+ topics are integrated into these curriculums. These curriculums typically cover the history and struggles of the LGBTQIA+ community, highlight prominent figures address issues related to sexual orientation and gender identity, and promote acceptance and inclusion of LGBTQIA+ people. However, the implementation of such curriculum has been a subject of debate, with some arguing that it infringes on freedom of speech and religious freedom, while others maintain that it is crucial for fostering acceptance and understanding. Some Christians have faced backlash when expressing conservative views on these social issues, which they argue infringes on the right to express their religious beliefs. For example, the right to deny businesses to anyone who conflicts with their beliefs, such as same-sex weddings, adoption agencies, and healthcare providers, have been debated. Pew Research Center survey found that about 54% of U.S. adults believe that businesses should not be allowed to refuse services to same-sex couples on religious grounds.
The media plays a crucial role in shaping public opinions and knowledge, but the rise of unreliable media sources has raised concerns about the trustworthiness of the media we consume. Unreliable media, the spread of misinformation and fake news, has caused public trust in the media to decline. While journalists help to inform people of what is going on, they have also become a part of the problem. Their responsibility to their audience goes far beyond just transmission of information. They should be the ones helping to call out false claims or fake news. However, because they want to be the first one to put a story out, they tend to not fact check like they should. One concern is the fabrication or manipulation of information, where they may present false or exaggerated information to make a story seem more eye-catching than it really is. Another major issue, bias reporting. Sometimes journalists allow their personal affiliations or beliefs to leak into the coverage of certain topics. The rise of news misinformation highlights the urgent need for media literacy and fact-checking. The spread of fake news is usually fueled by media literacy, speed of online platform, anonymous source, and personalized algorithms. News misinformation can have far-reaching consequences, ranging from public health scares to political polarization.
Now we go to Caleb Oakes, who is talking about dishonesty in journalism.
Journalism in the United States has always been intended to keep the government in check while keeping everyday citizens informed. In recent years, many U.S. citizens have started to lose trust in journalists and the media. A 2023 Gallup poll found that only 32% of citizens have either a great deal or a fair amount of trust in the media. On the other side, 39% of citizens have no trust at all. A 2023 Pew Research poll revealed that 38% of people follow the news closely. What has caused this disconnect between the media and everyday citizens?
A lot of people try to be dishonest in journalism in order to get clicks and get people to see their stuff. I know specifically on Twitter, there's a lot of times where it'll be something that's like blatantly false, but I'll have people like sending it to me because they think it's real.
I always tell people, if 5 or 6 media sources are reporting one thing and 2 are reporting something totally antithetical to that, that's generally a tell. Things are wrong on the side that the 2 are on. I think it's injurious to America when there's never any refutation of things that have been proven false. If anything, sometimes things are doubled down on.
It's no myth that many journalists in today's age have resorted to bias in order to tell the news. As journalists and the media, we need to prioritize getting the news back to what it's truly all about.
I would love to bring journalism back to what it's meant to be, just the facts, and I know that's a lot easier. It's a lofty ideal, I guess. Journalism should stick to strictly reporting the facts and what happens and what went down, and leave our opinions and personal bias out of it.
I'm Caleb Oates for MCSWU.
Thank you, Caleb. Nevin, how do you fact check information online if need be?
So, to fact check the information, so there was a news that I actually found yesterday on Instagram when they was actually discussing about shooting guard for the Philadelphia 76ers, James Harden, when his availability will be, which I actually came across through one Instagram page. I think it was called Mock Trades or something like that. And it was saying that they don't know the determinant of when James Harden will actually play, or they just gonna hold him off till they actually find right trade package. But I was actually watching one game last night, and I think it was the Celtics and the Knicks. And I looked at the bottom of the screen. It was saying something about there's like a slight chance that James Harden might play this Sunday against the Trailblazers. So it was kind of like a little misinformation or so. But what about you?
You don't know. Like I know when I look on Instagram, sometimes on the bottom it says this has been fact checked or this has not been fact checked. So that kind of helps people determine misinformation, but you can never trust it. It might not always be accurate.
Yeah, because sometimes when fact-checking information and stuff, because some of the sports media pages do really be accurate before like ESPN or Bleacher Report or CBS Sports actually release that news or so. So it's kind of like a 50-50 ratio with all that. But
I guess you never know. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Compass. Join us next week as we talk about the entertainment industry.